Thank you so much for that kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. How's everybody doing so far? Can you just give me a good shout out over there just to see the energy levels over there? Say, hi, Jem. Louder. I like that. Welcome to this presentation called Building Contextual Personas through Scenario Planning. My name is Emmanuel Rosario. I am a user experience designer based here in Toronto. So today we're going to be looking at a user experience research method that really digs into the why. The why as to what really is going on in the lives of our customers, our users, and how do we get to that why? Because we're so good at really identifying the how and the what. What did they do? How are they approaching these things? And we've got a really good arsenal of techniques just to get to that. But today, I'm going to ask you to dig deep at the why. And to do that, we're going to focus on scenario planning. So that's my Twitter handle over there, at Emmanuel Rosario. I'm looking forward to the conversations we're going to have today. And without further ado, let's begin. Personas are great. They're a highly revered and integral part of the user experience design process. They're born out of a long and intensive user research process, which involves talking to people about their needs, their goals, their concerns, their occupation, their behaviors, etc., in order to come up with a composite picture of someone who may use product X. So for example, if you have about 10 to 20 people over here, you talk to them, you dig deeper onto their goals, their needs, etc., and you synthesize those results in order to come up with a picture like Ellen. She's 45 years old, she's a mother of two, she's a proud tech adopter, and she pays for her coffee exclusively from her mobile device. Okay? No cash, no nothing. She just simply pulls out her mobile device, shows it to the cashier, and then her latte is now right there in front of her, steaming and ready to be consumed. But something happened along the way. By 2002, personas started resembling this strange list of stereotypical characteristics based on nothing more than marketing data. For some reason, the story that is supposed to tell you a lot about your users is taken out of the equation and replaced with form details such as name, age, job, income, few points about needs and goals, and that's it. Okay? What happens then is that personas generate more questions than answers. Instead of building more empathy and buy-in for user experience research, that is, they yield more doubts and questions about the veracity of your persona. I mean, just look at this thing over here, okay? You've got Sam Avery, 18 years old, full-time student, part-time barista, and then you've got all those important characteristics about her and the identity she's really, really proud of, okay? I mean, assuming that you're building something for her, there are just days when I wonder, how are you supposed to know what Sam Avery wants or needs from your product or service when all you have learned from her are, pretty much shallow and superficial qualities like favorite brand or artist, okay? How are you supposed to make your product more differentiable against all others when your persona couldn't even answer, why will Sam want my new product, okay? I remember seeing this persona at an intro to UX presentation at some boot camp here in the city, and I was honestly struggling to compose myself, and I was this close to saying, please, Mr. Instructor, tell me, why will she want a new music player to begin with? We know everything about her, but we don't know why she would want it, okay? This makes personas look like amateurish artifacts done by someone with a sluggish imagination rather than someone who is invested in the product design process. But I think that's solvable, okay? You just have to do actual first-hand user research in order to show that you have done some serious listening through the usage stories that you were able to get about someone like Sam. But there's a bigger problem. Traditional personas are so good on the behavioral side of the user, okay, their user needs, their goals, etc., and that's really critical data, no doubt. But it misses how these behavioral traits map relevantly with the business goals of the product, okay? I mean, sure, Millie, okay, will be able to use the product because it's needed to do her job, it has to be for desktop, not mobile because it's just too small, that screen, etc. But beyond that, personas struggle to make that leap from behaviors all the way to business goals. So how do we solve this? Okay? If we want to entrench user experience research in the product development process, how can we ensure that the insights that we generate can map relevantly to business goals? My answer to that is an experimental user research process called contextual personas that combine the behavioral strengths of traditional personas and the business conditions that give rise to your product, also known as the product context. Not only do you analyze the base details of your user/customer segment, but also the critical and the uncertain factors that drive the need for your product. This will be crucial in identifying problem-solution fit, which, as we'll see later, is the key to a winning product strategy. So far, so good? Let's move on. So I've been talking about context for quite some time, and you're probably wondering, so what does understanding context have to do with building digital products that people love? Okay? When we talk about context, okay, we're largely referring to the conditions that give rise to a product idea. It is composed of three aspects which, when analyzed, give you a fuller view of how individuals in that situation, in that context, work through their biggest and toughest challenges. The first step in understanding context is to establish the problem space, where the goal is to understand all that you could possibly know about the situation, about the context, in order to tease out the problem worth solving. So as Torontonians, you and I know that we are in the midst of a huge transition from tickets, tokens, Metro passes, all the way to the Presto card. And if I were to walk up to you and say, oh, okay, so are you using the Presto card? How has this transition been going for you? Are you running into some challenges along the way? I'm pretty sure that you would be able to rattle off at least one, okay? Or two, or three, okay? I mean, we could go on and on about this, but I'm pretty sure you would be able to say one human-centered challenge. That's the spirit of problem-space research. We are coming into a specific situation, a specific context, and just really trying to immerse ourselves and listen to the challenges that are in there and just getting a good sense of what is that problem worth solving. And once you find that one, two, or three problems that are worth solving, you now move on to the second phase, which is the competitive landscape, where you look at the constellation of solutions available and seeing which works. Okay? Is there a solution in place? Is there no solution in place? Are people making do with the situation? Is there a workaround? Or has there been really no solution and people are just throwing their hands up in the air and says, flip this, ... Okay? So I can't really say well, some of my other speakers, my fellow speakers have used the term, but I'm gonna be holding my restraint here because I don't want to open Pandora's box or something, okay? But yeah, competitive landscape, you look at all the possible solutions that are available. And as Jamie Levy, who is the author of the book UX Strategy, will tell you, it is usually in the competitive landscape phase where the opportunities for disruptive innovation might happen. So definitely check it out. It's a book worth checking. And finally, once you've done your problem space and your competitive landscape scan, you can now identify whether there is problem-solution fit, in which you can say, okay, there is a problem in here, and I just have the idea that might be able to solve it. Okay? I want to focus on the term might. Okay? You're still not too sure whether it's going to work, but you are positing something out there that, you know, could be a possibility, okay? So might, okay? M-I-G-H-T, might, possibility, not I alone can fix it, okay? So the goal in probing context, ladies and gentlemen, is that we really just want to understand what Clayton Christensen calls the job to be done. And by understanding job to be done, we're really looking at two things: the pain point, also known as the customer problem, and then the solution, or what customers will hire to get the job done. So the way Clayton Christensen articulates this in the jobs to be done theory, specifically in the innovator solution, is that the way people experience life is that a need comes up that people want solved, and they're looking at something or someone to address that need. So let's say, for example, your sink got clogged. What do you do? What do you do when your sink gets clogged? Call a plumber, okay? Your cable TV gets broken? Okay, call your TV man. The projector screen goes haywire in here. What do we do? What do you do? Call Potter. And what do you do when you see ghosts around? Who do you call? There you go. A plumber, a cable provider, Matthew Potter over there. Give him a good hand, by the way. Okay. Ghostbusters, essentially these are job fulfillers who are responding to a certain need or job story. And our role as product designers and strategists is to find that job to be done. So how can we tease out the job to be done? Okay? We're going to use a technique called scenario planning. So scenario planning is a strategic foresight method that lets you take an educated peek at some futures your product or service might play out. It's all about making measured guesses about the future using present or emerging trends in order to glimpse what's next. So the thing about scenario planning is that you're not really predicting the future in the conventional sense, like there is this black hat in which you just pull out a rabbit out of there. It's not those outlandish predictions, but you are using the data that you have right now, the information from the present, in order to take a careful peek at what might happen next. Okay? So it's not prediction, but careful speculation of using the present as the data. So how do we do this thing called scenario planning? So at the very broad level, we are looking at 3 stages in the scenario planning process. The first of which is to identify the trends that are specific to your problem space. And then out of those trends, out of the research that you have done during the context thing that we've looked at a while ago, we're going to be taking those trends into the second phase in order to build the scenarios that will be used then to really think about the product and the user more thoughtfully. And then once we've generated those scenarios, we're going to be taking them to your clients and your stakeholders in order to discuss, okay, so these are the things that we've found. Let's talk about future directions. Where do we go from here? Okay? So that's the 3-stage scenario planning process in a nutshell, and I'll be spending more time at the second phase because this is really where the magic and the foretelling happens. Cool? Perfect. So let's dig right in. So how many of you are big fans of the Toronto Public Library? Okay. How many of you have been, well, for lack of a better term, pleasantly surprised that your public library card is either expired or expiring? Happens to me all the time. Okay? I'm gladly about to return my book, and then the librarian says, "Oh, your card is expiring." Oh, okay. I mean, sure, okay, understand. The process is fairly simple doing it over there, but just to really make this point a little bit more clearer, I didn't pull this problem out of nowhere. In fact, if you look up online, the Toronto Public Library hosted a Reddit AMA, the July 14, 2016 AMA, and one of the questions in that session was, how come I have to go into the library to renew my card? Why can't this be done online? It's 2017. Also, why does it have to be every year? Okay, so that's so. I mean, there was a longer diatribe in that AMA, but that was really the core of the question. Why does this have to be done too frequently? Why do I have to go physically to the library, no matter how near or far I am, in order to just facilitate this thing? And I would encourage you to go look it up, okay? So let's say that you have been tasked to work through this problem and you wanted to know who in the city loves the public library so much that they forget when their card is expiring, okay? So the first step in the scenario planning process is to find your critical uncertainties, which is defined as the 2 big-ticket and uncertain factors surrounding your users, okay? Big-ticket and uncertain, show-stopping and hard-to-predict situations or cases. I've separated them into 2. By the way, do I have any students from the Masters of Design in Strategic Foresight and Innovation at OCAD in here? No one? Okay. If I did have one, I would really, they're the biggest experts in scenario planning because it's the focus of their study. Not that I'm a student myself, but I just keep on hearing that, and it was exactly understanding and getting to know that process that I started experimenting with this as a user research method. So the critical factor over here is defined as the most hard-hitting / crucial factor about your users that could impact the product or the services creation. Critical factor, big ticket item, and my friend Jason Palmental, who is the director of digital strategy at Isovera, all the way in Massachusetts, really had a good term to describe a critical factor, which is almost like a blocker or a potential showstopper. So just a bit of a rattle off in here. What are some of the things that you know could really impact a product or a services creation? What could potentially stop a product from even seeing the light of day? Any takers? Okay. Money. What else? Time. Anything else? Money, time, yep. Ethics, okay. So at a core level, the critical factor, since we've already been riffing off on the idea of it as a potential blocker, okay, you can think of a critical factor as something like budget, timelines, legislation within the country, management priorities, cultural climate, industry trends, etc. And as we would find later, one way to determine if a research trend is shaping up to be a critical factor is if that critical factor becomes unfulfilled in one way or another, will it somehow stop everything from even getting produced? And the other factor is the critical, this is an uncertain factor, which is, as the name suggests, things that are pretty hard to predict. So things like oil prices, exchange rates, the amount of snow or rainfall, etc. So that's your critical and your uncertain factors, and we're going to be looking at those two things in more detail because these two things will be critical in unearthing those crucial facts about your customers, your users, and the potential relationship that might emerge with respect to your product offering. So for example, by crossing these two, as we will find later, will you be having super users? Will you be having edge case users? Will you be having people who are, sort of indifferent to whether you are shipping something out there, etc.? So how do we find those two critical uncertainties? Well, we do a lot of UX research, okay? We do a lot of interviews, we do a lot of contextual inquiry, a dig into the analytics, surveys, ethnography, etc. The usual UX research methods. And then, once you have that, we're going to be taking them to the synthesis process in which the goal is really to just sense make as much as possible and then really just identify those research trends to the best that you could. So the way that we have done this in my own practice is that once you have done all the interviews, okay, we'll be holding up in a conference room. We'll be digging up all those research transcripts, put them in there, and then just say, okay, here's your transcript. I want you to write one important idea that you get from this interview, one idea per sticky note, and then just paste it on the board. Just put it out there. And then what you do is that when you've, say, for example, done 10 or 20 interviews, chances are you're going to have a sea of sticky notes out there, and then you're going to be grouping them according to segments. It's called affinity mapping, by the way. And it's one of the time-honored analysis techniques in user experience design. So you will notice that as you go through that sense-making process, that synthesis, you will find that there are some themes that are emerging. Okay? And as themes emerge, what you really want to do, ideally as a product and a client team, is to constantly discuss this. Ask why. Why is this a factor? Why is this showing up? Should we really pay attention? It's about really unearthing that deeper insight as to why people are doing this, why are people telling me this, and just really understanding the reasons and the inner motivations behind it. And eventually, you will get to a point where a theme just feels so critical or uncertain enough that you would want to look into it further. Once you've done your user research, okay, it will be time to identify your critical and your uncertain. That's when you will have to, put a ring on it. So let's say, for example, you've settled, you've done all your research, you've done all the synthesis, and you settled on a critical and uncertain factor, such as the relationship with the library, and then your date, and then the ability to recall dates. Okay, so let's say that's for the sake of conversation, let's say those are the two things that you settled onto. What you want to do then is to plot them on an x and y axis. On the y-axis, you have your critical factor, and your x-axis, the uncertain factor. You want to cross these two axes, and some scenarios will emerge. And what you're going to find in here is that it will sort of signal a user type. Okay? So I want you to designate a headline and a story for each scenario that results out of this process. And as we've seen a while ago, you want to talk this through with this team. The scenario planning process is not meant to be a one-off thing in which you do this big analysis and big research kind of thing, and you come up with all these scenarios, and then that's it, that's done. I would say that this is the beginning of a more intensive user research process using other methods, like, for example, mental models by Indy Young, customer journey mapping, story mapping by Jeff Patton, et cetera, et cetera. But the bottom line is that you're using this as some kind of a first whiff on where the wind is going, where the direction or the mentalities or the mindsets your users are really having and where they are going. So it's a lot like a weather vane, really, where the wind blows, and you want to pay attention to where that direction is really going. So report your findings and continue those research. Use these contextual insights to power up behavior-driven personas in order to achieve a fuller picture of how your users might relate with your product and how this relationship can drive decisions and strategy. We're not necessarily explicitly talking about behavioral aspects here, by the way, but more about the possible and the plausible relationships that could emerge as a result of working with your product or service. So that's your three broad steps. You identify the trends, your critical and uncertain factors, and then you build those scenarios, that critical and uncertain factor crossing, and then you take it to your clients, and then you talk about it so that you could determine what's the direction that we want to go, what are the potential implications for strategy moving forward. So I want now to look at some common questions, concerns, objections, etc., that I have been finding as I present this method on the road. One of the questions that I always get every time I give this presentation is this. You know what, Jem? This is a very nice process. I mean, yeah, very detailed and stuff, but really, aren't traditional personas enough? Like, really, what makes you think that adding context into the user research process is really going to make things better when all we really need to know are needs and goals? Okay, like, seriously, you're making my life complicated. Okay, I mean, here's my answer to that. It's not so much that traditional personas aren't enough. I would wager that the mere fact that your company is interested in doing upfront user research, it really takes you at a significant lead against other organizations that would just say, oh, just build the damn thing and let them all figure it out. Okay? The mere fact that you are invested and interested in talking to your customers, talking to your users, really puts you at an advantage. It's just that in some cases, traditional personas, or the way it's somehow been built by other practitioners, they don't always tell you, at least explicitly, why this model of someone's habits or goals is really going to be helpful to the business. Okay? And I've seen this issue time and time again. I was recently in a big data conference about 2 years ago, and I can still remember how at least 2 presentations were talking about the move from predictive all the way to prescriptive analytics. And I can still remember the conversation going something like this. You know what, guys? Predictive analytics is so good at modeling what users might do programmatically. Okay? Do I have any data scientists in the house? There. Is it correct? Predictive analytics is really good at predicting, at really just saying, okay, user X1256 will probably do this because of this algorithm or something. Correct? Okay. But it's simply a composite model that doesn't tell the organization what should we do. Okay? What should we do? So let's look at that again. Predictive analytics is good at modeling what users might do programmatically, but it's just simply a composite model that doesn't tell the organization what should we do. If the goal is to entrench data science into our respective organizations, then we will have to move from predictive to prescriptive analytics, because really, that's what our organizations are paying us for. That insight that would answer the question, what should we do? And I think the same question can be posed of us designers. What should we do with all of these interesting insights, both quantitative and qualitative, about our users? What should we do with these to make us differentiable? Because when you think about it, product development today is really a very, very high stakes game. Not only do you have to fight it out in terms of problem solution fit, but also whether your solution achieves the targets a company has for this year. I mean, we're certainly in a better situation today with UX and design being a key differentiator in the entire product development process. But the fact remains, okay, and we've seen this with Kit and Naomi's presentation a while ago, that most, if not all of our work happens within the backdrop of a business infrastructure, okay? If our goal is to build products and services that our users and stakeholders will love, then we will have to make sure that problem solution fit and business strategy can sing in unison, like two peas in a pod, like partners in crime, like Batman and Robin, and whoever pair you could ever think of. Okay? But this isn't always a smooth ride. Okay? You know, I remember giving this presentation probably about 3 years ago in PodCamp here in Toronto, and you know, I can still remember one question from the audience that almost got me down to my knees. And it was something like this. Jem, nice presentation, good process, etc., but how does this help me? How does this help me? Okay? Facial expressions and all, and like, how does this help me? And I was sweating buckets in there, and I was saying, what am I doing? Like, oh my goodness, am I misrepresenting the idea? Am I not making this clear, etc., etc.? And I was freaking out internally and stuff. But as soon as I let that freak out face dissipate, and I was just able to grab a cold one and stuff, I soon realized that there was actually a bigger problem surrounding that question, and it's this. It's not always clear how research blends well with organizational strategy. There seems to be this chasm, okay, between insights and a company's goals. We can be such powerhouses of data, no doubt. But how do we use that data in order to drive business objectives? If strategic planning is all about taking your company or business from the status quo all the way to a hopefully better state, then we will have to pin research to strategy. We will have to cross that chasm from insights and models all the way to roadmaps and conscious steps in order to achieve that state. So I want to end with 4 lessons that I have learned in trying to make that leapfrog, trying to make that transition in the very few years that I have been doing this UX strategy kind of thing. And I'm really looking forward to the conversation that we're going to be having in here. I hope they will be of use to you, and you know, let's keep that conversation going as to how you can really negotiate that research all the way to strategy and action leapfrog. So let's start with the first one. Always do a reality check about your product and mission whenever you can. Ask yourself, what is the job to be done and what's the problem that you're really trying to solve every time you're carried away. You know, this is so near and dear to me because, you know, every time every time the project kickoff happens, it's just so exciting. It's so hopeful. It's so full of vibrance and promise and ideas that the team does manage to get carried away. And it's really intoxicating to be in that kind of a creative groove. But I also find that whenever you're seeing that excitement really just go a little bit outside of the box, you just want to sort of corral it back and say, okay, guys, let's just look at what's really the problem that we have to fix in here, because we want to stay on track. We want to stay mission critical. Asking this question really forces you to be grounded on the things that matter. It ensures that you deliver more concrete ways to realize customer and business value as opposed to dreamy solutions that may not be doable. It ensures that you table ideas that are actionable, feasible, and valuable, okay? And not ideas that go along the lines of, y'all need a custom dashboard for this interface, okay? Not throwing out solutions out there and projecting what you think is right for the customer, when in fact there might actually be something more to the perceived need for a custom dashboard. So that's the first insight, asking about the problem, really clarifying it, and asking what's the job to be done. The second has a lot to do with alignment. And to me, alignment is really all about maintaining that open line of communication between you and your clients and stakeholders. It involves being candid and truthful about where you are and where you could possibly be. It also ensures that having these conversations will keep you on track and on the same page, because the last thing that you want to happen is to have some surprises lurking in the horizon. And as you probably know, if surprises happen here or somewhere, you just really do not know if those surprises can turn into fires that you will have to put out, and only the heavens can know if that fire is big or small enough for you to be able to manage with. So just keep that alignment, keep within that same page, constant communication, open and reliable. Third, communicate with everyone, because clarity goes a long way. Okay? We've learned a lot from Naomi today, despite the hauntedness of the projector, on what I call the other human factor. Okay, the other human factor, that web of professional relationships, and how it can make the difference between ideas that ship and ideas that are shelved. And I'm really convinced, ladies and gentlemen, that creating trust can be the single most difficult challenge that you could ever wage as a designer in the product world today. Not whether you should code, not whether you should use Figma, Flinto, Framer, Principle, Sketch, InVision, Zeppelin.io, or whatever cool new prototyping tool out there, which quite frankly is becoming a wild goose chase already. Okay? In life and at work, relationships are hard. Okay? But when you scale it, okay, the view at the top is just so worth it, okay? You see, I don't really think we designers are like Moses, who storms into Pharaoh's quarters and says, "Let my people go," okay? Or else your CEO is just gonna be kicking you out of the boardroom, okay? I think we're really more of a Sherpa who walks with our clients and stakeholders in order to climb strategy mountain. Okay? I really think we are more of that. We're walking with them. We're taking that hard trek with them, which is really quite a treacherous trek. If you just read the stories about people trying to go to Mount Everest and the scores of bones and casualties out there, you would know that it's really a hard trek to do. But when you get to the top, that view is just so worth it. Okay? So I'd encourage you to go for being partners in the design process, okay? Partners. Climb strategy mountain, okay? To take a phrase from design director Dave Maloof, climb strategy mountain with your clients and stakeholders so you can make the right decisions with respect to the product or service you're building and enjoy the view at the summit together. And finally, track success and revisit your strategy whenever you could, okay? Celebrate the successes that you've had, little or big, whenever you're on track. If you're seeing that you're just going a little bit off the rails, okay, no need to freak out yet. Just regroup and just say, okay, there's something going on in here, what seems to be the challenge, and then just collaboratively problem solve and pick out some ways in order to hack at it. Provide some allowance to course correct and continue to track your progress even beyond launch. I'm always fascinated every time I think about products that have withstood the test of time. I mean, sure, products do get redesigned every once in a while, but at the same time, if you've seen that they've stood the test of time, you can sort of say that they have really had some good processes in place. And I couldn't be any prouder when a company really manages to achieve that. And I think this is really possible when you have what Jeff Gothel calls the sense and respond mentality, in which you ensure that there is a constant loop of communication between you, the company, and the customer, and really just constantly having that constant loop. And you're hearing from them, you respond, you hear, respond, sense, respond. And it really plays very, very well with the process we've seen a while ago, because it helps you get your ear down on the ground just to really be able to listen and be able to plan a course of action if you're seeing something that might happen on the horizon. Having this sense and respond mentality greatly helps in ensuring that you're aware of what's happening in your customers' lives, plus responding to the best that you could. So team, in conclusion, contextual personas is the combination of behavioral insights and product context. It glimpses potential usage scenarios given user goals, motivations, and product/business contexts. It's driven by user research, this time with a view towards critical and uncertain factors, and it covers much more ground critical to achieving problem-solution fit and hopefully, eventually, product-market fit. If you only have to remember one thing, I hope it's going to be this. The best personas are those that make you feel for the customer. These are narratives that combine the deeper motivations behind their every action in order to find the true need that you will help address. Our job as designers, researchers, and strategists is not to load the world with more of the same, but with the right solution that solves a true need. Because at the end of the day, we live to build digital products that people love. Thank you. So the slides are over there. It's a freshly redesigned UX portfolio, by the way, so I'd love to know your feedback. And then I also have my Twitter handle in there, @GemRosario, and I am definitely looking forward to the questions that you've had. And let's kick right in. Any questions? None? Come on, there's got to be something in there. How many more do we have?
Minutes?
Yep.
Like 10.
10? Okay.
No, like
7?
7.
Okay. 7 minutes left.
I'll ask a question.
Okay.
What would you say if you worked at a company where maybe it was entirely revenue driven, maybe entirely by ad revenue, and maybe a certain culture of almost contempt for the users settled in, especially among the executives, and you're trying to make a case for, a UX design focused approach and this problem solution fit?
Well, the only thing I could think of right now is, when we've heard this recommendation a while ago, which is to make the case for user experience in terms of numbers, the ROI of user experience. But then I also think that sometimes, especially in our age where you can be bombarded with facts and still not be convinced about the facts, that sometimes you may have to, really pick your battles. And I think that you can only do so much really selling the benefits of your user experience design and that empathy for the user. I think you can only do so much. But at some point, you have to. I still believe that you will want to have to fight the good fight, but there will also be instances in which it's just not going to work. And there could be two moments in there. You can say, I really couldn't do it, therefore I need to rethink my approach. Will I need to leave the company, or will I have to take a more I don't know, maybe data-driven approach or more profit-driven approach in order to make that case. Those are the two ways that I could only think of right now. But I do think that being very mindful of whether you want to wage that challenge is going to be very crucial.
Thank you.
Yep. Yes.
For companies that aren't even like at the point of designing
Mm-hmm.
personas, what would you recommend in terms of like maybe a resource to get to that point?
When you go to Context for UX, I would strongly recommend that you have a look at Indy Young's Medium article called "Describing Personas." Now, there's going to be a bit of a methodological debate in here because the way we have known persona creation is through those persona placemat formats in which you have the needs, goals outlined in certain sections of the page, etc. I'm not gonna comment on whether the persona placemat format is a good or a bad thing, but I would just simply say that the biggest benefit to looking at Indy Young's article is that it forces you to really look at the inner motivations of your target customer segment beyond just simply knowing how they're gonna be working with the interface and what are they gonna be doing with it. So it's that empathy-driven, motivations-based kind of thing that I would start as a first step to really just get to understand, well, why might they be needing something like what we're going to be offering or putting out there into the market. Yep.
Right. So in relation to different scenarios,
Mhm.
scenario planning,
Mhm.
in these different contexts for your personas, oftentimes you come up with these user stories, and there may be a number of user stories
Mhm.
for these different personas and contexts and scenarios.
Yep.
And some may or may not align with business. goals.
Sure.
How do you have practical advice for how to prioritize or have those conversations with stakeholders about how to prioritize those contexts and those stories?
The canon of scenario planning would recommend that it's a constant conversation that you will have with your stakeholders. And what usually happens as soon as you've identified those four, and in some cases they even go for a X, Y, and Z axis. I mean, I'm not gonna go as far as to go for the Z axis. I mean, the four is good enough for me. What usually happens in there is that there would be at least one or two scenarios that seem to resonate with them that they might want to explore further, and I don't think I can give a very direct and foolproof answer, but I think it would really come down to which of these scenarios really seem to be aligned with what might be happening in the future, given everything that you know given everything that you know as a stakeholder company, given your own business interests, and when we've done this process with a big community newspaper, I think it was just really insightful for them to know who were their customer segments beyond what they initially knew. And I think any kind of insight that can be gleaned about the customer segment will be definitely helpful in just planning what might be the best course of action moving forward. It comes down to communication, at least how I would say. Did that help? Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Anything else? All right, then. Thank you very much.